such a pleasure to be here in front of you. Thank you, Marvin, for inviting me to be a part of this conference. After Godfrey and Jackie spoke, I feel like I think the conference is done. Yeah, but I'm glad to be able to add my perspective as a homemaker, as I usually prefer to call myself. First things first, my name is Daphine Byamukama. I've been married to my husband. His name is Joseph Byamukama. We'll be making 6 years this year in October. We have 2 children. And the firstborn is Abaho, he's 3 years old, and the second one bubbling in the corner there. My husband and I have a ministry called Veracity Found, where we desire to equip the church, and the idea is to also, I think I prefer to look at my notes. The idea behind the ministry is researching and resourcing for church renewal, basically to equip the Ugandan church to be ready. And we do this, one, by having an expository Bible study fellowship every Monday and Wednesday from 6 to 8. Some of you have been there. The second way is through a Worldview Wednesday podcast, where we cast the light on cultural issues through the biblical perspective. And then thirdly, we also do research on various issues that are affecting the Ugandan church. The most recent one has been the report on Phaneru. If you come across a report, an 80-page report on Phaneru, the Phaneru Fellowship, that's Veracity Found in partnership with Alpha. And then personally, I have also been a part of that by starting a women's community Bible study, where we go through the scriptures biblically. We go through the book from the first chapter to the last, and this is my 2nd year starting that. We are currently going through the book of Genesis, and it's been absolutely great to have women come together and study the word and discuss. I always find it very interesting that men usually discuss these things and go into the depths of them, but then when it comes to women, we seem to be in any other thing except theology and the Bible, and yet we impact the society in very invisible but very magnificent ways. So it is such a privilege for me to start that Bible study. Marvin invited me to share my perspective as a homemaker in light of education and the home. And I would like to start by sharing my story, and also then bring in a bit of, not just a bit, but a whole lot of scripture in terms of the home and the purpose of the woman, but also the man. I have to say that my journey has been very progressive. I can't really say that when I was being born, I look forward to staying at home. Like every other woman, I saw myself climbing a certain ladder somewhere. But God has a way of providentially leading us to where He desires us to be. So I come at it with a lot of humility, because this conversation tends to hurt women, because it's like we are saying they're not supposed to bring in money. It always comes off like, sit down, shut up, keep quiet, don't contribute, don't do anything, let a man do it all. So I want to come at it with a lot of humility, because I'm also learning, I'm also growing. I've been surrounded by a lot of women who have poured their wisdom into me. So yeah, that's my confession there. So I don't have all the answers, but I hope this will be a conversational starter, depending on where each one of us is. But also, lastly, I'm also glad that we have brothers amongst us, because usually the last time we had this conversation on the women's group at church, there's a lady who's almost getting married. She's like, where are the men? Where are the men? We are battling with this thing, but are the men thinking about their contribution to me finally sacrificing? And I thought that was a good point, because I think that decision also has to be a collective decision to encourage the woman to be whatever she is with the husband's input. So I'm really, really glad that we are having men here as well. So My story begins with me being born by my mother. She gave birth to me when she was still in school. And so because of that, I was raised by my grandmother, and my grandmother braved the journey and sent my mother back to school. So as you know these stories, my dad was absent, and I have to say that he actually passed away without me seeing him at all. So I grew up with my grandmother tending to me. My mom had to go back to school, and I talked to a lot of women, and they usually have Senga sessions, like towards university there, your auntie starts to say, "Oh, is that man? Why are you getting mad?" The purpose is to get you a degree and get going. You should be independent and all of that. So the idea of homekeeping, homeschooling, none of that was under my radar at all, until I met my husband, and it was in the premarital counseling session, where it was about who is going to do what and all these things. And he talked about homeschooling, and I looked at the man. Oh, it's okay, we shall discuss that another time. That was me trying to avoid it at all costs. And looking back, he actually was serious, but I never thought about it, I never even imagined it. So I said, we'll figure it out as time goes on. So I get married, and then at that time I was in my banking profession, and the juggling begins, going, punching the hours, then come back home and all these things. And I remember my friends, when they did the bridal shower, they had this talk where it was about, now you're a woman, you have to juggle it all. Career, don't let it slide, and also don't let your home slide. And well, you are in the emotions of you're in love, so you're not really listening, and yeah, the marriage finds you. And then reality hit me. I was usually so exhausted. I was just so exhausted. And my husband, as you know him, Muchad, and to say that I'm tired. And it was just the beginning. So this whole juggling thing, the whole mental exhaustion, and the whole counsel was, put the bank aside. When you come home, find a way to relax. And honestly, there was no way to relax. The banking work is too intense that sometimes I even dream of the files that I didn't work on. So it became very difficult for me to do that whole juggling thing. And I told my maid of honor that, you know what, Johnny, honestly, I don't think I'll do this. I can't imagine the whole juggling and then bringing in 1, 2, 3 children. I don't know how women do that. I commend them, but it was just very, very difficult. But then the other factor was, what impact am I making in this office? I don't see the impact. I was approaching my 3rd year, and I just struggled. The 2 ways I saw people doing it, either you climb through the ladders, or you find another job, or it's like progress or success was based on how fat your salary is. So I talked to my husband, maybe I should, apply for that job, and he would ask me why. And I'm like, more money? Progress? And it's like, where are the script? Because I didn't. So then, but at the same time, the Lord was warming me up towards ministry, which is where I'm now. I saw my heart drawing towards being a part of the women's ministry at church, being involved here and there, but the job, you're so exhausted. You're hardly available for all these things. So how do you put it together? So eventually, some of you may know, the Lord opened up that door for us to go to the States, and we went there for 3 years. My husband was doing a time to breathe after the bank, but also time to think about where God would have me be. And it was a difficult 3 years for me intellectually, because I needed to think, how are you going to apply that degree? Where are you going to put your energy? And the Lord was faithful, and I think around that time I met a lot of homeschoolers, because in America the homeschooling movement is huge. There are a lot of women already doing that, and I started having conversations with Daphine. Those conversations were very helpful to help me think about the home and just how to do it. So yeah, that's kind of where my heart, that's where my story is. And so when I look back on my decision to be a stay-at-home mother, it has been that progressive journey. When I was coming here, I talked to my mother and I asked her, she's been very much a career lady. So I asked her, if there's one thing you regret starting your career young, of course you're a single mother, you had to go and make the money. For me to go to school, she had to take care of me. And the one thing she said was, I didn't have enough time with you. And I thought that was very helpful for me, even when I was coming to talk about this. And so that's her not having time for me, but also looking at the contrast between my mother and my grandmother. I owe my career as a homemaker on my grandmother because I remember the attentiveness. My grandmother's presence. She didn't ask every month food, her listening ear, and all of that. You cannot pay a salary for that. So just looking at that, and it caught me, and I said, this is who I want to become. This is, when my children are older, I want to be looked at as that woman who poured your sacrifices into my home. So I compare those two women, but also not to take away from my mother. My mother does refugee work, and I was talking to her about the issue of juggling and all these things. And she told me that, the struggle we are having today is, she worked in an organization where she was supposed to counsel a lot of people who have been affected by gender-based violence. Now, not only women, I mean, even these days men are being beat on left, right, and center. So she says, when I look at the issues I've had to counsel, there's a lot of selfishness that men and women envisage in their families, or in terms of the way they look at children. She was saying we live in a culture where children are like a trophy. We want to give birth to children anywhere, anyhow, without thinking about the decision of that. So she said a lot of issues I deal with, you look at it and the issue comes from the family. They were raised without any love. No one was there. The parents are busy. Everyone is on their career track, keeping up. The children are raising themselves. Some of them are, moved from relative to relative. The relatives sexually violate them, and the children have no space. And I think COVID really brought this issue up, because we are having pregnant girls under 12 who have been violated by their own fathers. What a blasphemy, So imagine how that child is going to grow up. How are they going to think about marriage? How are they going to think about the home and the sacrifices it entails? So that mindset, and so, things like I'll give birth to 10 children through different men or through different women and whatever. So that kind of got my attention to, and it brought me to the question, how do we view the home? And how do we view work? What is that worldview? Godfrey and Jackie talk about that worldview. What is behind how we view the home and the work? And we have to admit that the world has indeed shaped the way we look at home, the way we look at the home, the way we look at work. And I've looked at, I wanted us to look at how the world shapes us. One of the ways is, number one, the way we think about work. Usually when we are done with school, it's about my personal goals and looking at work merely as a tool through which I can make as much money. You don't find a lot of children thinking about, what am I good at? Where would I love to leave an impact in society? They look at work in terms of money. We work for money. We also don't see work as an opportunity to serve others or to influence them for God. We are looking at money, that fat salary, or whether it's a business or whatever it is, you're thinking, you're checking progress dependent on the income that is coming in. And so, of course, because of that mindset, I have a lot of people who look down on my choice to be a stay-home mother. It's like, what are you doing there? Where's the money? So, so you don't have to save. How much do you have on your savings account? And, you know, everything is defined by that, you know. The success markers in Uganda right now is Olinao Kachi, physical, tangible possessions, a car, land. I'm not land in that village of yours. No, you have to have land here somewhere in town, and then you expand, and you know, things that are tangible. And yet the scriptures really have a completely different idea, you know. Success in the biblical world is faithfulness with what God has given you. It might bring up these physical things, yes, but ultimately it is faithfulness to the scripture, to the biblical worldview. Work is supposed to be missional. It's supposed to be helping us think, how am I influencing others for the gospel? How am I, whatever workstation you are at, what is my work ethic? You know, I normally tell people that people are afraid of employing locally because we are the last to punch in, and we are the last to punch in at work, and we are the first to get out of work. We do shoddy work. We are not to be trusted, and yet it is through that work ethic that we can actually envisage the gospel. I have a quote here from Caroline. She says this. She says that in her book, The Measure of Success, uncovering the biblical perspective on women, work, and the home, she writes that accomplishment is the psychological reward for hard work. Money is the tangible reward for hard work. Godly influence is the spiritual reward for hard work. And she adds and says that in the biblical narrative, work is a co-labor of love. Tasks done in partnership with a gracious God who uses our labors to bless others. So that is how we are supposed to be looking at the work we are all doing. So if we look at work in that regard, then whether you are working in an office, whether you are working a job, whether you are welding, whether you are cleaning the KCCA compound, you are doing great. You are being missional. You are serving others to make it better. So across the board, whether it's in the home, whether it's outside the home, God is being glorified because you are partnering with Him to serve others and to influence them. But then the other way that I think we also need to look at what has shaped the way we come at homeschooling, education, and the home is the experience, the past experience we've had. I love Godfrey's analogy, asking us how many have been raised by fathers and all these things. Humanly speaking, we tend to walk in the steps of those who have gone ahead of us. You will normally, when you get married, you will most likely imitate what your mother did, what your father did. So it becomes very difficult to imitate if you had no one in that picture, if you had no one in that position. And I have to say that unfortunately, our generation, for the most part, is an orphaned generation. We've had parents who have been absentee parents, or at bare minimum, they've given us the shelter, food, school fees, and that is it. So children have sort of raised themselves, and we have unfortunately carried this on because we don't ask ourselves, is this right? We tend to ask, does this work? Even when I went to boarding school, what is the problem with boarding school? I came out fine. But have you looked at the consequences, the far-reaching consequences of that action? Yes, it works, but in terms of the biblical perspective, is it right? We don't ask ourselves that. And then, of course, the idea of blaming teachers, the child is not fine, you blame that teacher is the problem. You have parents moving children from school to school rather than paying attention to what the teacher actually is saying. Or even things like, I'm going to replace my responsibility with house girls, you know. The house help can help, but she's not the owner of the home. So you're having a lot of parents, both men and women, simply relaxing whatever career track because there is a house help, and yet by the mere word house help, she's simply helping. She doesn't bear the vision for which you and your spouse were married, which is to raise a godly seed. So that kind of mindset has shaped us a lot, and we are not taking time to pause on how then can I do differently. The other thing, of course, in all of this is the abuse and negligence that people have seen growing up. So you find things like adultery is almost celebrated in our culture, I have to say. That you find, yes, there are women who have taken it, okay, traditionally, that I'm going to stay home, let the husband bring in an income, and you see that there are so many stories where the husband, after this wife has given in, I don't know, 40, 50 years, and he's divorcing the wife. And so the daughter sits there and says, my mother has been the epitome of sacrifice. So there is no man who's going to tell me to sacrifice for you. I'm sorry. Let me go make my money that I can rely on, but not on the love of this man. Or even vice versa, women have also contributed to the whole mambo jumbo. So this abuse, so when we open the scriptures, people are not receiving them because of this abuse, because of this background that they have grown up in, but also these messages that have shaped the way we look at success, the way we look at progress, and all of that. I think most recently in Kenya, there was a furious debate that came up when I think a judge said that housewives should start being paid. And it got the Twitter handles really busy and all of that. And so I asked my grandmother, what do you think about this? And she said, you see, our society is unraveling. Family was supposed to be something you could depend on. But you're seeing people who, even wives who have sacrificed, like I've mentioned, you find that the husband is throwing her out. So, yeah, you might as well give her the money. So that was her perspective. But I think the principle is to show that the family is being unraveled today. The choices that we are making, both the husband and wife, they are very selfish. And so now the children are basically having no examples whatsoever. And I think we do well to refer to the scriptures on how then we ought to look at the home. I think Godfrey mentioned, I loved his presentation on the family and society, and I would also like to add in a bit of that and give a little history. Before the Industrial Revolution, the Industrial Revolution was a period in the 19th century where machinery was being now part of the economy. Before that, the home was the place of production, as he rightly explained. The family was its own economy. So you would find that the husband and wife and children were that business unit. So it wasn't this place where you just go to relax. No. As a friend of mine said, the homes were like the little factories, So that is, and because of that, it was also a place of instruction. Because you're spending time with your children, shaping them, and making sure you are preparing them for the reality around them. And you see a lot of that even in the scriptures, as Godfrey mentioned. When we look at Proverbs 31, usually women come at that and say, they use it just to affirm, or even women are supposed to be in business and go, in other words, again, the adolescent. No, that woman in Proverbs 31 was in her home. She was doing all that work in her home. She was a businesswoman. But she served her husband, she served her children. Everything was there within her vicinity. So the Bible sits well within that history, that the home was that place where they produced whatever it was, depending on what the home was involved in, whether the family was that of carpenters, whether it was a family of fighters, whether it was a family of whatever it is. It was production. But now we look at the home as a place of consumption, and it's very common on Instagram. We're seeing a lot of styles of how the home should look like, people keep updating, these curtains, Every year you're putting in new curtains, all those things. That's not how the home was intended. The home was a place of instruction and therefore the first place of discipleship. Okay, so I would like to say that the theme of what I'm going to say now is that the home is a strategic place for evangelism, where the parents come together to instruct their children for the home. And I think a number of scriptures have already been described here, in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verses 4 to 9 and many others. But I think I would like to read Psalm 78. Godfrey mentioned a bit of it, but I think I would like us to read there. Psalm 78 verses 1 to 8. Reads, "Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old, things that we have heard and known, that our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, but tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might, and the wonders that he has done. He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach to their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, that they should not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast, whose spirit was not faithful to God." And that's where the passage ends. This is one of the longest psalms, and this person is basically talking about what happened when one of the generations failed to hold on to the legacy that their fathers passed on. He's talking about what Godfrey and Jackie mentioned, Deuteronomy chapter 6 verses 4. That passage where it talks about how the Lord God is one, therefore you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and your mind, and you will teach these children, you will teach these things to your children continually. That is the Jewish confession of faith. And it's referred to as the Shema. And the Shema is a Jewish prayer that serves as a centerpiece of the morning and evening. So every time a Jewish man or woman would be praying, they would refer back to that. And that was the center of every Jewish home, to not only love the Lord with all their hearts, but also with their mind and all that they are. And that was supposed to be passed on to the next generation, to hold up the precepts of God. But one generation lost it, and they didn't pass it on. And this is why Israel's story actually is not as good as it turned out to be, because they forgot. They forgot what God had taught them. In one of the books, I think Judges, it begins, I think it ends where it talks about how every man did as they pleased, because they forgot to pass on the legacy that was entrusted to them. And our Christian worldview is based on that Jewish foundation. We are supposed to pass on what has been entrusted in us. We are supposed to raise our children, both men and women, both husbands and mothers, to know the law of God, so they can put their hope in God. And I'll also read Titus chapter 2. I'll read chapter 2. Chapter 2, from verse 1 to verse 5. I'd like someone else to read, I'd like some volunteers to read these other verses. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 8. Any volunteers? Yes, please. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 8. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 4. Nick. Proverbs 3 verses 11 to 12. Yes, please. Proverbs 31 verse 1. The gentleman behind Godfrey. Proverbs 31 verse 1. Then 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 14 to 15. David. And then lastly, Proverbs chapter 30 verses 7. Yes. So I'll begin by reading Titus. But as for you, teach what accords with sound doctrine. Older men are to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith, in love, and in steadfastness. Older women, likewise, are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so to train the young women to love their husbands, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. Proverbs 1 verse 8.
My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother.
Ephesians 6.
Fathers, do not stir up anger of your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord.
2 Timothy.
2 Timothy 3:14 and 15. But as for you, continue in what you have learned and have firmly believed, knowing from whom you learned it, how from childhood you have been acquainted with sacred writing, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus.
Proverbs 31. The words of King Nominal, utterance which his mother told him.
Proverbs 3:11-12 says, My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father the son delights in.
Thank you. So the first thing that I would like to mention is the place of the woman in the home. The scriptures are very clear that the woman is in charge of the home, in the sense that the welfare of the home is entrusted to her, as we've just read in Titus 2. But the wife doesn't do that on her own. She is under the leadership of her husband. And that partnership then is the basis for how parenting is done. You've listened to the various scriptures that talk about how fathers should not provoke their children, how you should not forsake the mother's teaching. When a home does not have the mother in it, it's basically empty. There is nowhere the children or the husband can come and find shelter. And that is the example that is passed on. But these things are not just, we don't stay at home just for the sake of beauty. We do this so that we can glorify the gospel, the word of God. You see how that passage ends? The young women are trained to love their husbands and children, so that, it ends with this, so that the word of God may not be reviled. When you look at that then, the home takes its rightful place as the first place where the gospel is going to sink into the hearts of the children. It's not out there. When we think about evangelism, Matthew chapter 28, when Jesus is talking about disciples, we should also look at the home. How are we present? How is the mother present? How is the father involved, walking alongside the wife to see whether the children are in turn, whether they are listening and obeying. It's not just something that the woman alone should do. And you find a lot of people who think that it's like, chala wali waka, I can do my own thing. That's not how it is in the scriptures. Yes, primarily the mother, the wife, should be invested, but so should the father be in various ways. And the various ways in which the fathers were involved is by equally instructing the children. That even as the mothers taught, we see here in Proverbs 31, that these words were given to a son by a mother. Yet the whole, historically, the book of Proverbs was a manual that the Jewish father used to instruct the son. So that means the father spent a lot of time in that home. He didn't just come to rest. He didn't just come to do as he pleases. So even as women become wives, it's not up to her to come up with a vision. It's the husband and the wife who should sit together and come up with that vision. And it goes all the way back to Genesis. Paul is writing with that Jewish understanding of Genesis, as Godfrey put it. God gives the instruction to the man to tend and keep. In other words, the man is supposed to be is supposed to be stewarding his strength to serve his family. That means he has to be involved. He has to be knowing how are the children, who is in tune with the mother's instructions. When I'm so exhausted, and usually my husband comes back home from wherever, I tell him, take care of that son of yours. And I'm within my right because he's equally the father. And eventually Abaho is going to grow up to be a man. He's going to be looking to my husband, not so much to me. So that partnership, even as the wife is involved in the home, even as she's primarily responsible for the home, the man's overhead and responsibility and stewardship should be more than bringing in the money. Okay? So that's the partnership that I'd like to present. And then the idea of women working at home. The principle there is that the moment a woman gets married, your first priority is the home. Whatever you do, you have to make sure that your home is in place. For me, that meant that I'm going to make my home the priority by working from home, by being a homemaker. I do many other things, but primarily I consider myself a homemaker. For others, whatever it is, you go out, but whatever you go to do, your home must be your priority. How is that job? How is that business improving your service at home? If whatever you are doing is taking away from the home, sister, it's time to reconsider. It's time to reconsider. And unfortunately, in our schools today, we are not told these things as women. The world is about celebrating equality in the sense that, oh, there are male doctors, oh, there are female doctors, oh, there are male engineers, oh, there are women engineers. I asked my husband, the ladies you studied with in construction engineering, how many of them are in the fields in that hard work of the sun? Some of these careers are so detrimental to the home, so detrimental. And you have to either ask the Lord to help you use that skill in a way that is familiar to the home, or many times you have to deny yourself and find something else to do. In as long as you have been married and you are a Christian woman. So whatever it is that you are doing, how is that making you more available for your children? And the other aspect then, how the men come in. My mom was saying about the selfishness that men and women have. Most of the time people get married without discussing the personal goals they have. The woman might have a skill that she really sees she would love to do that cannot be replicated in the home, and the man also has his own personal goals. But these things, they don't talk about them. They get married, everyone starts following his career track. And no one is sacrificing for anyone. And who loses then? The children. Because there's no parent who is putting their personal goals on a pause for the sake of the big vision of the family. Same thing with the husbands. And this might be difficult to hear, gentlemen, but your careers equally affect the wife. Very much so, and the children. as joking about it with a friend when we came in Dakar, that when my husband started his PhD studies, the school had a meeting where I was involved. And at first I'm like, why am I in this meeting? But then as the rubber hit the road, I realized that his PhD work was really hectic. He puts in a lot of time, and that affects the family time. So even in my complaining, we had to sit down and talk about it and say, we agreed that I was going to pursue this PhD, and you supported it. You know, so I had to sit back, and it was a place for humility, that I think it's time for me to allow him to do this, because he mentioned this. So whatever gifts or things that you want to pursue, they have to be considered in light of the family goal. Whatever you do outside the home is going to affect everything. So husbands should notify their wives whatever you want to do. If you are, let's say, a banker and suddenly you are a CEO, that is going to affect everything. The weekends are going to be out, you're going to have late meetings, which means your children are going to rarely see you, you're going to rarely have any devotional time, and surprisingly, that also includes ministry. If you are doing too much that your wife is like, Mommy, there is some balance there that needs to be kept, for the sake of your marriage, but also for the sake of the children. Okay, so let's think about that. And the last time I spoke, they asked a question in the Q&A, and this person was asking, why do we have nominal Christians? And by nominal Christians, they mean Sunday-going Christians who don't really influence anywhere. And I was talking about how the faith is supposed to be passed on. But faith can't be passed on by absentee parents. You can't instruct your children when you hardly see them in the week, when you hardly sit down with your husband to talk about the changing circumstances. Okay? So we have Christians today who basically are just Sunday going, and so this talk of devotional, sitting down with your children, it sounds so alien because they've never seen anyone do it. So it is now up to us, we who have rediscovered the scriptures, which have been clear, but somehow culture sort of covers them up, and we do the usual thing. We have to rediscover these scriptures and be more intentional with our children. Whatever our goals are, whatever we think we are called in, the home must be priority. And I would like to also share a few examples of a few friends. I have a friend whose husband is a landscaper, and I was talking to him, and I was asking him, what about money, the home, and all these things? And he said, that for me, I decided, even when I was going into marriage, that I'm not going to take certain work beyond certain boundaries. Yes, I'm going to get this landscaping job or carpentry job in Masaka or wherever, but I don't take those jobs because I need to spend time with my children. And for me, it was very, very humbling to hear a man say that. So even as the wife is equally involved in the home, and the home is huge. People will ask, what do you do at home? There's a lot that can be done in the home. The home is actually more hectic. In fact, I tell my friends that my bank job was only preparing me for the work that I do at home. It's very, you are diverse, you are involved in so many things at the same time. Now, even adding Godfrey and his wife now who homeschool, you do a whole lot. So when we think about the home, let's think about it in that wider perspective, that it is the center base from which the children should be raised holistically to then go out and influence the world for Christ in whatever career track they will be in. But they will have started from the home. And that can be possible if each one of us, if we are married, to start rethinking our goals. What is our family vision? What is this family about? What am I good at? Let's stick to one thing and invest in it. We are living in an economy, we call it a gig economy. We started like a business, we're homeschooling, we call actually all these things. But it takes away from so much. we have to uniquely ask ourselves, what have you called me to do? Ask the Lord to provide opportunities. I know the economy is up and about, but there is so much at stake here. As Marvin talked about, our children are going to be the MPs of tomorrow. But how are we going to raise responsible, God-fearing men if we are not in the home? If we are simply trusting the public school, yet the school is supposed to be aiding your journey. It's supposed to help you to create this partnership between you and your child's teacher to see how you can shape them together so that they can grow up. So this idea of the woman being in charge of the home is not just an independent invite to the wife and the mother, but it's also an invitation to the father and the husband to endeavor that even as the woman is sacrificing and committing to the home, the husband and the father is equally involved so that the children can equally see this collective unit of people who are committed to themselves as a marriage, but also they are committed to the children and the whole family. So holistically then, whatever is pursued is not pursued at the cost of the family. The family has to be considered, whatever you're doing, whatever gift it is, even if it means to pause that thing, even if it means to give it up completely. Because if we are faithful to God, He's going to lead us. Because ultimately, it's about faithfulness to Him. It's about influencing our context for Christ, not so much to add to ourselves possessions and all these things. So, in the biblical perspective, then, the home is priority. It's priority in whatever we do because that shapes who we are. That shapes our children. That shapes the people that we do what? We become. And even, you might be here and you are single. And I would like to encourage single brothers and sisters, find couples that you admire. Walk alongside them. Be involved in their family homes and see how they are working out that journey. Those examples will prepare you for when the Lord calls you for marriage. Marriage is not just about enjoyment. It is a place of responsibility. And I think that's what the scriptures teach us. And if we think of it like that, then the home will ultimately become primary and therefore will be successful in as far as our evangelistic means are concerned. Because people see how we are faithfully taking our marriages seriously. They're seeing how we are shaping our children, not only intellectually, but also character-wise. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Daphne, for willing to share. I should say she was the hardest to get to this panel, actually. I couldn't answer a lot of her questions. At some point, I almost said, wow, and I come for the cake. But she just wanted to know why she was, what I had in mind as well. So, but I'm glad she could share that from that perspective, and I hope the ladies in the house, or in the church, have been encouraged in one way or the other. And that's primarily the whole purpose of this thing. Is this is just a starter for those non-ending conversations about life, about family, and about the continual reminder of ourselves of what the scriptures expect of us in the realm of education and the family as well. So we just have a few minutes to the end of this conference. I will quickly ask maybe one of the brothers to just put 3 chairs up front here and invite our speakers. For the time in the conference, I personally usually don't look forward to if I'm the one supposed to sit there. please, just quickly, we have like 20 minutes to wrap up this. If you have a question for these three, please do share. And as soon as this is done, I'll kindly ask Pastor Bill later on to come and give us closing remarks about the day, briefly so. And then please, Daphine. And so take this forward. I feel like Monica was also supposed to be here. But I'll challenge you to make the way of finding means to, but she can join as well. So if you want to see a bit of the practicalities of the things that have been shared here, if you can ever find ways of visiting her in her home, I have been there. I almost asked to be adopted, but I would have loved to be in such a home and to be raised in such a way. So please, if you have questions for any of the four, regards homeschooling and any other thing family related, you have 20 minutes for this, and we'll wrap it up. So please just.
I think I have like 4 questions.
Hey. It's 4 people.
The first is going to go to Jackie and Monica. I've met their children and they're so amazing. But okay, we're in a world where I tell people I would love to do homeschooling. And they tell you those kids are always weird. Those kids are antisocial, like there's something about them that is not in the kids that actually go to school. You also give them the idea of, yeah, I've seen Jackie and her kids are okay. And I think she can help with the homeschooling, but they say even if the child goes to a homeschool, still there are a few kids, so that child will still be weird. So I've met Jordan, your son, I've met your kids, and these guys are really so short. Your kids are so amazing, and I kept on wondering, what special thing do you do with these children to be social, to love God, like for them not to feel like they are, like your kids should be feeling like there is a lot of curfew around them, you're tight, but then they are social, like they're so loving. Like what different things do you impart to these kids to actually make them the way they are?
I used to joke with a pastor wife friend of mine, and her children were going to regular school and mine were doing homeschool. And there's a time she asked me that, and I say, hellfire at home and paradise when we leave the house. So what does that mean? But just joking aside, what I would mean essentially is you have to have a foundation of fear for God. They know that I'm not the highest authority. They know that when they mess up, they are not going to only answer to me. They know that they have to be accountable to God individually. And we start that from day one. The prayers we have at home, the fellowship, of course I'll joke that it's hellfire, but really it's accountability. Yeah, we try to make them realize that God has to be first in everything, and when you please God, God will bless you to please other people, and you will find favor with people. There are many things I haven't taught my kids, but they've learned on their own by learning how to open the word of God on their own. And they'll come and they'll say, Mommy, I've done this, or Mommy, what about this? And we have a discussion. They challenge me because they have been trained to be students, like you had the rest saying. They have been given the tools to be inquisitive and to ask questions, and we don't shut that down. Another thing is that Why they are social and friendly is because they are social and friendly at home first to each other. One of the questions I usually get about that is, how do you raise different age groups and teach them differently all at the same time? And how do they socialize? And an 18-year-old with, the next one is 15, then the other one is, the next one after that, my third is 9, then the last one is 4. You know, she's just turned 9. So how do they socialize? I thought teenagers will go with teenagers, and the young ones will go with the young ones. What happened is that I realized the best place for them to learn how to be social and friendly is at home. The older one takes care of the younger ones. When I was pregnant with my second, my firstborn walked through the process with me. Mom is expecting, this is what the baby looks like, every stage. Then when the baby finally is born, you're now a big sister, make sure Seth is fine, go play with your brother. Someone may think that is so restricting. She's a big girl, why is she playing with the little boy and all that? But over time you see the fruit. They can all have the same conversation from 4 years to 18. They can play the same games. So when I throw them out into the world, the 4-year-old can sit down and talk to an adult. And not at the same level, but at a level which you will see that she's processing information and she's inquisitive, and it's a healthy thing, and we encourage that. The 18-year-old can babysit. She's currently doing more of children's ministry. That's my background as well. She's teaching children's ministry at her church, and she's volunteering at a refugee and information center in Kiseni. She takes herself there. I don't need to be there. She's, socializing with Somali women that are very close-knit. These are things that she has discovered on her own, and also having a background at home to be able to socialize with any age, any person, any situation.
You had 4 questions.
So I just feel the temptation to keep it here. Does that sound like socialization?
I'm not sure.
Compare it with when they ask that question, what do they mean by socialization that is happening in school, which is not this?
What they're trying to say is these kids, okay, like you're exposing your kids to like even different behaviors from other like fellow students
in school.
Yes, they go like they do this like they play, and then of course I think your kids go for play dates, like they go play. So they feel like these kids don't get a chance to play, like their age play. Like they don't swim, they don't do all those things.
I get it. That's what they mean by socialization. Compare that with this.
Yeah.
This is what I call true socialization. I mean, how old are you? I mean, if we told our age, we are not age mates. And that's life. The world out there is not a world of peers. It's a world where we relate with people of all age groups. And if you talk about socialization, what better way to socialize than to socialize in the world as it is? And the family was built for that. That you come in a place as a baby, Abasa, in a place where there are already 2 adults, and maybe some teenagers and some others. And in the school, I'm not demonizing it, but if it is socialization, most times it's the law of the jungle. That's what we call socialization. A 5-year-old grows up with a 5-year-old. They are 10 at the same time. They become 11 at the same time. They keep progressing like that. That's the whole idea of schooling, putting them in classes. And that's why we come out of school and we are weird instead. We don't know how to relate with those who are younger and those who are older, because we can only relate with peers. So it's a question of what do they call socialization. But we both socialize. The question is, which socialization would you prefer? This one or the Love Journal?
I also wanted to chip in and refer back to a book I read. It's called The Well-Trained Mind. I would recommend it for anyone who wants to do homeschooling. And she talks about, she deals with the questions that people have and she brings that up. And she actually says that the so-called socialization at school is actually terrible because these children are coming from homes that have different worldviews. So if you're raising your child with a Christian worldview, they're going to find another worldview. And if the other kid is smarter, most likely they will outdo your kid. So it's this whole competition, and children are trying to catch up with their peers, and that's where you learn bad manners. And we know this, the struggle involved in school, because you want to look like a certain child and all these things. So by the time the child is done with that whole public section, you don't know, is this child mine? Because they've been affected by all these worldviews that these children have, and they are so unprepared, as Godfrey says, for the actual world, because they've been so stuck up in keeping up with their peers, and all of you are inexperienced. So what are you going to learn from each other? If the homeschool child is going to learn from the holistic experience, from her parents, from the children, from her parents' friends, because when your children go to other Christian homes, they're able to come and compare and say, Mom, this person told me this, they said that, there's that discussion. The children in the public school, they have no time for that. So things keep hitting at them. So by the time they return to you, you have so much to unteach them. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Which socialization is it? Is the one in school really healthy, or the ones in the homeschool?
Let me finish my questions with Jackie. The other was, I think it also goes back to Daphine. So,
just maybe before you come, because mine is related to your first question.
Okay.
And I want to go a bit practical here. Yeah, I know that under the sun here, nothing is 100% perfect. Okay, so as a teacher, I taught for 7 years at Kitabi Seminary. That's a boys' school, but it's a seminary. And we had St. Cecilia on the other side on your way to Ishaka. So now these boys are always inside school premises, and those guys at St. Cecilia are always there. So what I realized in those years is that whenever we took these students out for anything, maybe schools competition and what, our boys were behaving weird, as she said, and those girls were also behaving, whenever they see the opposite sex, right? Yeah, so they wanted to behave, we just control them and be fair. Yeah, so that really reminded me of what I was taught in psychology, of trying to isolate one sex from the other. So you see that children who grew up, who started in only boys' schools suffer somehow, and those who are only in girls' school. So to leave that there, then come back to what is going on here. I talked to my friend Michael in the US when I said something has to be done vis-a-vis the system of education of Uganda. So I talked to many people who have been homeschooling. My friend Michael has been homeschooling the whole of his life, because their firstborn daughter is 26 years and she was homeschooled. So all their children have been homeschooled. So you know that the response that I received from Michael Miller is really in the line of what Jocelyn has just asked here. And I'd like you guys to try to share more. Because your answers to her question have answered me partly. But when I asked Michael Miller about this whole idea of homeschooling, knowing that he's an expert, a veteran, you know what he told me? He said, yeah, brother, this is good, but it's a long theme or topic to discuss. But nothing is totally good. Even homeschooling has got its own problems. But because his second born, Jacob, was going to commit suicide, yeah, God just spared because in the pistol there was no bullets, so otherwise he would be dead by now. And then after that, we discovered that since he was 7-8 years old, and now he's 20 plus, he has been addicted to pornography and many other things. They had to involve Christian counselors to help him out until when they said Stephen was not letting him get married, and he got married, he said. But, and my community was trying to just quickly show me that maybe part of all that comes from the homeschooling, but they're just there at home with parents, they grow up like that. So I don't know, and yeah, I think I shared with some brothers here. I was like, what is Michael telling me? That homeschooling is not paradise? So there are things that children also miss while being homeschooled. So I don't know really what Michael, as someone who has been homeschooling for the last 26 years, told me that, no, brother, we need to reconcile. Because me, my point was, I'm fed up with both boarding or day school in Uganda. Yeah, so I wanted really to start homeschooling just tomorrow. And then told me, brother, please go slowly. This thing is also not easy the way you might think it. So what do you have to say about that?
My first experience with a homeschool family life was actually like that. Missionary friends of ours had similar issues. Their two boys turned out to be in a very similar situation and very rebellious. And coming from a missionary background, you kind of don't expect that to happen. But when we examined it and we talked about it even with our father himself, we realized that so many times when you're homeschooling, there is a tendency to be lazy, tendency to be laid back. We were citing examples even for our own selves. You know, sometimes you're thinking, okay, they know what to do, I don't need to get out of bed. You wake up at 10. You know, they've already woken up at 7, they're doing what they have to do. Some others would even be found in, these are testimonies, some others would be found in their 90s at noon. Or she's left them with their patients and she's washing soaps the whole day. You know? So, like any other situation in a family setting, like what we're talking about, the father, the mother have to be involved in every aspect. I was very reluctant for my teenagers to use phones for a very long time, because I knew that was going to be time taken away from our dialogue. You know, I was very reluctant for them to go, even after I gave my firstborn her phone, and I did not allow her to go on social media for a very long time, because that would take away again from my time with her. I was very jealous with that. And even now that she's on, she knows when she has overdone it. And she knows when she starts listening to other voices that will tell her, oh, you have to have a certain type of style, or you have to have a certain amount of money, or we have that dialogue. So parents, I know parents have to be on the job 24/7. It may seem like a lot of work, but it's life. It's life. Just like in a marriage, you can't say, oh, I'll check on you next week. You know? It is life, breath. I want to know, and I need to know that my husband sees me and I see him, and we have this communication. Likewise with the kids. If there are tendencies of self-hate or self-condemnation, or there is something that a seed, you see it sprouting, and there are tendencies of depression or keeping away, you talk about it, you address it, you deal with it as soon as possible. Checking in Like what I usually do is I have check-in moments. With my eldest, it's very open. I'll tell her Fridays are ours. We've been doing that since she was 14. So Friday evenings is just me and her. We talk. We talk and talk and talk and talk. It's not about her behavior. It's not about what I want her to do. It's just talking. Yes, we talk. So in those conversations came about because something had been cropping up. To keep her confidence, I can't say what it was, but it was going to be really, really detrimental in the line of what you were saying. So I realized I need more time with her. Yet I'm a stay-at-home, I'm a homemaker, you know. I felt like I'd already invested more time, but like I said, I realized this is life. This is every day, every moment. You're washing plates, or you're cleaning the house. Mommy, by the way, this. Mommy, by the way, that. Mommy, did you know this? Mommy, I found out this. Then you know, okay, that's a conversation that has to continue. Talking about so-and-so said maybe they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and like, okay, that's a conversation that needs to be addressed. Or so your cousin says he has money in the bank, Mommy, what about mine? That's a conversation. So the hints and the red flags are always there, and it's something you can't ignore, it's something you can't postpone, you deal with it then. So you'll be able to look for those red flags. Is there a sign of depression? Is there a sign of maybe some issue we have to deal with? I'm not saying that it's a foolproof plan, but I believe it's a God plan. And so many times I realize that He allows certain things to happen, not so much for my sake, but for their sake as well. This is their story. This is their testimony. This is their life. They're also learning. This is something I want to look back on. So I get where you're coming from. I get the isolation. I get the tendency to be lazy and just lay back and what it could lead into. At least you will start knowing what you're expected to do.
Thank you, Monica. Philippians 3, just to add on what she has said, it says, 3:5, what then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you believed as the Lord assigned to each. I, Paul, planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. So what you're talking about there is what happened at the end of the day. There we are in the realm of fruit. Now, fruit is not my responsibility, is not your responsibility, is irrespective of the environment and the context we are in. We are called to do our part. Do the watering, do the planting, do the pruning, do everything. The result is always in the hands of the Lord. You can't guarantee the fruit. Even us here in church, people are here disciple you. You can say, what? A church that has discipled people and what have you, but the fruit, there are many times, the other question that has always been common is, what happens to pastors' kids? It's fruit. The fruit is in the hands of the Lord. That doesn't take our responsibility to do what we are called to do. Do it faithfully. Faithfulness is the call we are given, but the fruit is the Lord's. None of these is paradise, like you said. We are not in paradise. Homeschooling is not a guarantee for the perfect kids. No. Just like Christian schools are not a guarantee for the perfect kids. Just like there is no church group that is going to guarantee you the perfect Christians. But to everyone, you are called to be faithful, and to whom much is given, much is going to be required. That's what I can say in that context. But it's a good perspective for all of us to be aware of don't get into homeschooling saying, I got a savior here. Jesus is the savior who saves us all. Wherever we are. I mean, we went to sometimes demonized public schools. That's where we went. We are here by the sheer grace of God.
Right, our time is up. Thank you so much. It's the whole point of building relationships, and these questions can always be answered in one way or the other. But I'm grateful for all of you for your time, for coming through. I'll give just a minute to all the four to just say a line as a closing remark to us. Just a minute. Anything. Yeah. Sorry for the one who was found holding the mic.
Just an encouragement to us as parents, like Mr. Chazi said, there is no guarantee, there is no, it's not like a sure deal that we are trying to raise perfect children or, the standard of society. What we are trying to do is to realize and reawaken the call for us Christians, Christian parents, to remember what God has called us to do in this world. Not to allow the world to set a standard for us to follow through, but for us to live out that responsibility that God has called us to do. Do it faithfully. Yes, it might be tedious, especially those young ages, for the little children. Sometimes it will get really, really hard, even as the children grow older. But let's remember that this is the work that God has called us to do. It is discipleship, and we are raising a godly generation that we pray and hope that even as our children, we set a pace for them, that they too will pass on what they have learned from us to the next generation as we continue to grow, to do the work that God has called us to do.
Am I allowed to say plus one? I think for me, I would like to add to what Jackie has said by saying that we don't do these things alone. I appreciate what God has said that we are a covenant community, and that when you start having children, you have a whole community of other believers who are on this journey working it out. We all have reached there. As much as we are seated here, we are also learning on the journey. And I look at my journey and say that I have had the input of other brothers and sisters who have gone ahead of me, because I realized I also did grow up from a public system, but when the call came, I had to immediately repent of what I'm doing, and I immediately started doing what is right. So wherever you find yourself, don't say, not and here. You have people around, other brothers and sisters, whom you can stand with and do what is right. And the Lord will continue to send them source of His grace and His word that continues to replenish us, because there are seasons of exhaustion as parents, especially when you become more intentional with your children. There will be that season of exhaustion. But there is aid that is available to us through His word and the community of other believers.
Thank you. And I think to whom I would say, it can be scary, I understand, but I mean, to the faithful, the Lord will be faithful. And I think that's what for me has stuck out from what she mentioned at some point. The journey is not going to be smooth all the way. But one thing I've come to discover, that our children are with us for the least amount of their time. The Lord was to grant us life, and He carries. The children are with you maybe up to about 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, about there. Just 23 years. Or 20. Some even 18. Thereafter, they will be off. So, if the call is to invest in those past 18 years, I think it's worth it. I know one lady in this country, they run a family ministry, the Langas, Mr. and Mrs. Langa, Beatrice and Stephen Langa. I've worked with them before. And I remember being asked this question. She stayed home. They did homeschool necessarily, but she stayed home when their children were, before they went off to high school. She had a master's from Boston University, and she comes home, and her parents are in there. Her parents asked her, "You've chosen, we educated you and put a master's on you from Boston University, and you've chosen to put the master's at home to raise babies." And she said, "So you are trying to tell me that my children are not worth to be taken care of and raised by someone with a master's degree?" That hit me. The children are precious, and they deserve the best. And it is that best was chosen by God. God chose the best for your children. He didn't give them anyone else, but that best for them is you.
Sometimes I feel like...
Can I cut you off and given remarks?
You say everything.
But your story a bit on, because there is that thing of how do I get resources? How do I get the books, the material, and all that stuff? And I know from your story how you got the material and all that. So probably in your closing remarks, you could share your story, because most people are scared. I need a lot of money to buy a particular curriculum and get it all to share, to give to the children. So maybe that could be the way you a bit of that.
Yeah, I was thinking, what else can I say? It's funny how God just speaks, you know, from her perspective, hers and his. They said almost everything that I want to say. About the curriculum, just before I give a bit of my story, something interesting happened. So, you don't know that I know you. And I know you through discussions I've had about curriculum. You received a WhatsApp message from somebody asking about what curriculum you would recommend for an autistic child who has episodes of epilepsy. Remember that WhatsApp conversation we had? That kind of support is available, you know. You ask somebody who tells you about somebody. I mean, pull on the thread. You just never know. And now we physically met, and yet he didn't even know that he helped me help somebody else. You know? And that's the way God works. Half of my library, and when I say library, I mean library. I have like tons of books. Tons. More than half of my library, I have not even spent a coin because of those little threads you pull on. Someone will ask, "Oh, what are you doing?" I say, "Okay, I'm a stay-at-home mom, I'm homeschooling." "Oh, no, so I'm homeschooling, I have some books. Do you want some books?" I'm like, "Yes." They're like, "But what curriculum do you use?" I'm like, "Everything." And that has only enriched our experience, you know. My entire science curriculum came to me through that kind of relationship, and then later I realized it is the best science curriculum I could have ever, you know, looked for. It's called Answers in Genesis, and it is so good. I recommend it for any family. If you get a curriculum like that, actually on the side, if at all you want recommendations on books or whatnot, please ask us before you go. So if you get a curriculum like that, you find that you're not only just teaching biology, you're teaching chemistry, you're teaching mechanics, you're teaching weather, you're teaching all that, and it's tied into the Word of God, and there's so many questions you're answering, and there's so many subjects you're covering all in one. And I keep telling people that, you know, even if God has blessed me with all these resources and all these connections, I have realized that even if I told my kids everything I know, and I will not boast that I know so much, but I will say I know quite a bit. And if I told my kids every single thing I know, from every experience I have had in my life, I have worked as a wedding decorator and planner, I have worked as a caterer, I've worked as a teacher, you know, music ministry, pastor's wife, counselor. If I'm to teach my kids only that, they will be fine. I'm a trained artist. I went to school for it. I graduated, got a degree. If I'm to train my kids only what I know, they will be better than I am. And that's the mercy of God. Like you know, he was saying earlier, if you live on a farm, teach the kids what you have. Teach the kids how to raise the animals and till the land, and they will even add on to that. Maybe they'll get into now preservation and export and all that. So don't be discouraged and feel like you have very little to give. Draw from your experience, draw from the Word of God, and you'll be amazed at what you'll find.
All right, thank you so much. We can be here for the next 1 week. So we'll cut it from here. Someone was whispering from this other side that if you don't mind sharing your contacts, please do, and people can reach out. But I have their numbers, but I am saving them. It's not easy to get these people, so it's okay. But anyway, if they don't mind, they'll share at the end. But thank you so much, Monica. Thank you so much, Godfrey, Daphne, and Jackie. We are very grateful for today and for that. Please, if the call comes again, please do as you've done today. And next time, probably we'll do better planning and give it some bit of time so one can spread and we can probably have a little more people. But this has been equally helpful. So I'll give Pastor Bill 2 minutes or 3 to just give us closing remarks about the day, and he will close for us in one.
Thank you, friends.
Just let me be a bit quick. Don't go nowhere. I don't want to fall off the window.
So it's possible with pastors, but
okay. I wanted to just bring up 2 points. Number 1, words of thanks. Number 2, the way forward. Beginning with the words of thanks. I don't know how I can thank the Lord God for this day. Thank you. He has done it for us, and I'm overwhelmed with joy, more than any other person here. Nick, do you trust me? So number two, I want to thank so much Marvin, this one. Marvin, when I see this, these things have been keep coming up in my mind. The day you wanted to slap me a few years ago because I preached the gospel to you, and then how we met on that hill in Nagumunya, we had a talk, and after that talk you did not remain the same again up to this day, and to see how the Lord is using you. Thank you, God. All this is about him. You might think about Pastor, but it's this brother. Immediately after joining our church, I saw potential in him, and we prayed to God and opened doors for us, and we sent him to Lusaka for more pastoral training. That's why where he met with our brother Godfrey. I'm sorry, I always come to call him Michael Chazé because we have Michael Chazé there, and Michael Chazé has been around in this city for years. Yeah, but my brother Godfrey Chazé, and they had a talk about this, and he has been really pushing me on this for some time now. Yeah, I don't know, he does not have a family, I have one, but he's more on fire, he's been on fire on that. Homeschooling, he has been disturbing me, and I was we'll think about it. Oh, we'll talk about that. Not until a few months ago, I can't remember which month of that, and something went viral on social media about, is it Chibuye, something like that? Students were going for a tour somewhere, and those of you who saw me, I was like, what's this I'm seeing? So when I saw what was going on inside that bus, anyone watched that video? Everyone. Yes. So that was really the reason why this thing has begun today is because of that. Because when I saw that, immediately it's as if I was seeing my own daughter or son in that bus, one of the students in that bus. And I was like, why do we send our children to such schools? And then I remember this guy had been on my back, hey, homeschool, there's no living for him. I think that video put me on fire that I had to put something on our RBC WhatsApp group, and we had a long discussion, remember? A long discussion about that, and that's when I started asking friends from around the world who homeschool, what should we do? You see, we reach at that point when the people have been hearing Peter preach and say, brothers, what should we do? Because we don't know the way to go. And then, that's when again he said, but we can. My brother Chazé, we met a few years ago. You brought to me something from the US, I can't remember. We met briefly, and then again when he went to Zambia, we talked, he went to Osaka. And then we have many mutual friends, even as I was talking about still homeschooling with our mutual friend, Josh Ratti. He told me, I have a friend of mine who is good at that. I've forgotten his name. Okay, go back home and I'll send it to you on WhatsApp. I want you to see good features. I know this guy. So, and then we spent the whole week together at Arts. He has been lecturing there. And I've been asking his students, that guy's good. That guy is good. Brother, you are good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because I told them I'm going to leave him and have his thank you so much, brother, for coming to teach this to us today. Jackie, I've talked to you many times, but I've never known Jackie. So you guys, we grew up with people laughing at us, you people did education, teachers. But today I see all these guys are teachers. I'm proud of you having done education. Do you want to go out for an education course? So Jackie, thank you. That was a very good presentation. Thank you for coming. You are the wife of my brother. So thank you for coming on our invitation. Daphne, members of RBC, thank you, members who have taken the day today with one us. I talk about Oli and Nick, and the rest of us have lost again. With your two pastors and Idris, we've lost again. What do I mean? This guy's wife is here. That guy's his wife is there. Wow. How I wish my own wife would be here. It was Daphne. You man, you are going to miss. To bring Daphne to present what she has presented, that was reason. Daphne. Oh, that was powerful, my friend. Because I know I'll go back home and share what I heard, but it won't be the same as someone here. You don't need to come. What is Stephen? I know. Our two wives and Stephen are not here for some genuine reasons. They are genuine. But so as I end with the words of thanks, I'll come to the way forward. Sister Caroline, Monica, I've really benefited a lot during the time of break here, the questions, and I still have many questions for you. I'll get your contact. So going forward, number one, this was on short notice, but it has been good. I did not expect it like this myself. I just beg all of you guys, our visitors and members of our ministry, why don't we make this annual? And we really make sure, because I believe not only our wives and husbands who are not here, but other people out there. When Daphine was speaking, I was like, I wish many women had, because people, I'm despising their home, even husbands knowing that, no, my wife is there, the general manager of my home, so they want to make themselves busy outside their homes and leave all the work at home with her. They needed to hear what Daphine is talking about. I was talking about it. So if maybe next year we organize something better and bigger on the same theme, if Daphine can come back and just prepare better and just bring the same, because I'd like many parents to hear that, both men and women. That was so powerful. So thank you so much, guys. We are so grateful. By the way, if I was asked to really thank you with an envelope, even 2 million in it each, but you guys have managed to come and meet just for free, for the sake of Christ. That's love. Thank you so much, friends. And please, the way forward is, I'm just humbly requesting that we have something bigger and better on the same topic, maybe next year. And 2, members of RBC. RBC needs a school as soon as possible. And I'm going to have to, when the Lord put it into my mind here, He put it at the same time in the mind of my pastor. So we need to have, Kabbalah Baptist Church has got Eagle's Nest. We need to have one. That will solve our problem. Jackie, can you relocate to Mbuku and give her She doesn't know where I'm going. I could give all my children. But Jackie will put me into them. She will talk. So thank you so much, friends. Has anyone fallen out of the window?
One was just about to. Only that it's closed.
But we said I close it. So thank you so much, friends. Also brothers and sisters who made it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Next time let's come and invite more other people. I was talking to someone here, Joel, I said, you are the ones to benefit more because some of my children at the university have missed out, but you have not produced. So yours are really just preparing for them very well. So we thank the Lord for it. Yes. Lord, I don't know where to begin from. I don't know how I can thank you for a day like this one. I don't know how I can thank you for our dear brothers and sisters that you've used to come and speak to us, to put us on fire, to go back and in our positions and do what you created us to do in our families. Thank you so much for our dear brother Godfrey and our 3 sisters. Thank you so much for using Marvin to make sure really we have something like this. Thank you for the brothers and sisters that you brought today to be part of this conference. Thank you, Lord. We are so grateful. May you help us implement this, Lord. That if we can have another time, maybe next year, better conference where we have more time or enough time to interact with people are going back with many questions. So Lord, give us enough time, maybe next time, to have a better thing. And invite even our friends and neighbors to come and hear. Even Muslims need to come and hear something if they want to. So Lord, we want to thank you. As we reach the end of this day, we commit ourselves into your hands as we leave this place back to our homes. Watch over us again on our way back as you did as we can. Lord, and some are just meeting for the first time today, and we thank you for this opportunity to know each other. May you be part of our relationships that they will give you glory at the end. And Lord, help our brothers who have just married, our sisters who have just married, to put in practice what Sister Daphne has been talking. Yeah, I know it's not easy. If we could ask ladies in this room to stone any of the speakers, Daphne would be the first to be stoned. But Lord, because what she's speaking is something that people don't want to, especially women. But it's what we need to do. So Lord, we thank you for everything. Be with us then until we meet again. In Jesus Christ we pray. Amen.
Right, thank you. Travel safely back to your respective homes.
They don't want to leave, you see them. They don't want to leave. That's the source.
Jackie Mumwade Musola Kuakalango. So we run into and some of the people who want to learn much in that services, and we can join hands together to help
branches.
So the name of our home school is called Dara Christian Academy. Dara meaning Mountain of Wisdom. It's located in Chanja, that side of town, yes. Chanja side. You're welcome to come and have conversations. I usually have friends over to come have conversations. Our age group is from 2-year-olds. Right now, my oldest student is 9 years old. But for each year, we keep on adding a class to our school.
Thank you.